Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Yoon. I'm a staff attorney for Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida. I am with the Family Law Unit. Specifically, I am with the Victim Rights Project, otherwise referred to as the RISE Project. Also, during this presentation, you'll hear from my colleague, Ms. Pamela Weisberg.
Hello, everyone.
And we are here to present some information about victims' rights here in the state of Florida, specifically for in honor of Victim Rights Awareness Week during this month. Before we get started, I just want to go over some brief disclaimers here. This presentation is not intended to provide specific legal advice. Information in today's presentation is current as of April of 2023. This PowerPoint may not be reproduced, distributed, copied, or cited in whole or in part without Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida's written permission. For more information, please feel free to visit our website at www.coasttocoastlegalaid.org or call 954-736-2400. Okay, as I stated at the beginning of this presentation, we're going to go over victims' rights enforcement. And let's talk about knowing your rights. Who are we? A little explanation of how this project began. So Coast to Coast Legal Aid, otherwise referred to as CCLA during this presentation, the Victim Rights Project began when the National Crime Victim Law Institute, the NCVLI, launched a National Victims' Rights Enforcement Project called RISE, and that stands for Rights in Systems Enforced. After receiving a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office for Victims of Crime in 2018. CCLA was only one of 6 sub-grant recipients of this project. After the NCVLI grant ended, CCLA's Victim Rights Project was able to continue its work after receiving a grant from the Victims of Crime Act, otherwise referred to as VOCA. So we represent victims of intimate partner violence and elderly victims of any crime and assert their civil rights during criminal proceedings at no cost to the victims. This program has no financial guidelines or restrictions.
So who is a victim? A victim, according to the Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 16, is a person who suffers direct or threatened physical, psychological, or financial harm as a result of the commission or attempted commission of a crime or a delinquent act against whom the crime or delinquent act is committed. The term victim includes the victim's lawful representative, the parent or guardian of a minor, or the next of kin of a homicide victim. What is domestic violence? Florida Statute 741.28 defines domestic violence as any assault, aggravated assault, battery, aggravated battery, sexual assault, sexual battery, stalking, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death of one family member or household member by another family or household member. A family or household member means spouses, former spouses, persons related by blood or marriage, persons who are presently residing together as if a family or who have resided together in the past as if a family, and persons who are parents of a child in common, regardless of whether they've been married. With the exception of persons who have a child in common, the family or household members must be currently residing or have in the past resided together in the same single dwelling unit. And who's considered elderly? Well, the Florida Statute 825.101 defines elderly as a person 60 years of age or older who is suffering from the infirmities of aging as manifested by advanced age or organic brain damage or other physical, mental, or emotional dysfunctioning to the extent that the ability of the person to provide adequately for the person's own care or protection is impaired.
Okay, so as the title shows here, Amendment 6, aka Marsy's Law. This slide and information is to provide some background of how Marsy's Law came about and how it's come into the state of Florida. Back on November 6, 2018, voters in Florida passed Amendment 6, otherwise known as Marsy's Law. That amended the Florida Constitution to include victims' rights. Please see Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 16. Marcy's Law is named after Marcy Nicholas of California, who was stalked and killed by her ex-boyfriend back in 1983. Only 1 week after her death, Marcy's mother and brother, Henry T. Nicholas, walked into a grocery store where they were confronted by the accused murderer. The family, who had just come from a visit to Marcy's grave, was unaware that the accused had been released on bail. Marcy's mother was not informed because the courts and law enforcement, though well-meaning, had no obligation to keep her informed of the whereabouts or the release of the accused. In an effort to honor his sister, her brother formed Marcy's Law for All in 2009 to give victims and their families constitutional protections and equal rights under the law. Marcy's Law went into effect in Florida on January 8th of 2019. So let's discuss Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 16. This is where the victims' rights here in Florida, Marcy's Law, has been codified. What rights do victims of crime have in Florida specifically? Well, we kind of differentiate the two sets of victims' rights here. The first set here we're going to discuss are set up to protect victims first. Every victim is entitled to the following rights beginning at the time of his or her victimization. When we read this statute, this does not mean that a victim's rights come into place or are enforced or come into play, I should say, when a criminal case is opened. That's not what the law says. It's at the moment, at the time, at the beginning of his or her victimization. So what are these rights that attach at that moment? Number one, right to due process and to be treated with fairness and respect for the victim's dignity. Also, they have a right to be free from any intimidation, harassment, and abuse. Right to be reasonably protected from the accused and anyone acting on behalf of the accused. The right to have the safety and welfare of a victim and the victim's family considered when setting bail, and also the right to prevent disclosure of information that could be used to locate the victim or victim's family. As you can tell, most of these are catered to or set up to protect the victim from the moment of his or her victimization. Oftentimes, when a criminal case is opened, I'm going to refer to the second bullet point here, right to be free from any intimidation, harassment, or abuse. A victim of intimate partner violence or an elderly victim of crime has this right, and this right attaches to the courts, where they order a no victim contact as part of a pretrial release order. Also, the last bullet point here of preventing disclosure of information, that's very important for victims who are trying to get away from the accused or the abuser. They try to relocate and they do not want the abuser or the defendant to know where the victim is relocated. Criminal cases are public cases, they're not private. So some of the victim's information may be part of the public court file, the public case file. Well, they have a right to keep their public information redacted or confidential so that a defendant and or any third party on behalf of the defendant cannot try to find the victim and intimidate them, coerce them in dropping charges or anything of that nature. Now, here's a second set of victims' rights, also as part of Article 1, Section 16 of the Florida Constitution. A victim shall have the following specific rights upon request. So there's a difference right there. The first batch is at the moment of victimization. These are come into play for a victim upon request. Number one, the right to timely notice of, to be present at, and to be heard at all public proceedings involving the criminal conduct. This is critical for victims. This is where these sets of rights, I say, are part of the victim's participation in a criminal case. So the first set of rights for the victim's protection, then we have the second set of rights for the victim's participation. And that's why these are upon request. Victims should not be required to participate, but if they want to, they have the right to do so. And that right includes to be at criminal court proceedings so that if they want to see what's going on with the case, they have the right to do so. Also, I consider the next one, the most important right for victims of crime is the right to confer with the prosecutor regarding pleas, sentencing, and the disposition of the case. This is critical. We explain to our clients here at Coast to Coast Legal Aid that being a victim does not mean that it's the victim, him or her, versus the defendant. It's a criminal case is the state of Florida versus the accused or the defendant, because when a defendant or the accused is arrested and charged with a crime, that individual did not break the laws of the victim, they broke the laws of the state of Florida. Therefore, it's the prosecutor or the state attorney on behalf of the state of Florida who is handling the case and prosecuting the case. In that scenario, a victim's right to confer with the prosecutor is critical because the victim has a right to have a voice. They have a right to tell the prosecutor what they feel is justice for what happened to them. They have a right to tell the prosecutor what discuss any safety concerns and things of that nature, while let's say the defendant is on pretrial release conditions, and maybe there's some substance abuse or mental health concerns that the victim has. All those issues can be communicated to the prosecutor, and the prosecutor under the law has an obligation to speak with the victim about his or her concerns. That's why this right to confer with the prosecutor is very important for victims of crime. Also, a victim has a right to be informed at every stage of the criminal case. This is intertwined with the right to confer with the prosecutor. Most victims that we deal with here in our office don't know where a criminal case begins or where it ends and anything in between. They have so many questions and they can't seem to find any answers. And honestly, prosecutors, state attorneys, they're interchangeable here. They're very busy. They have hundreds of cases, hundreds of victims, hundreds of witnesses, hundreds of police officers that they're dealing with on a weekly basis. So time is not a luxury for state attorneys. So the right to confer with the prosecutor and to be informed at every stage of the criminal case are critical. What we do, Ms. Weisberg and I, as victims' rights attorneys, we help bridge that gap between victims and the prosecutor in criminal cases, so that we can be the conduit to tell the victim, hey, this is where the case is, this is what stage it's in, this is where it's headed right now. These are kind of the terms that the state attorney is discussing and trying to resolve this case. So that's a lot of the work that we do here as victims' rights attorneys. Also, the second to last bullet point here, victims have a right to proceedings to be free from unreasonable delay. This came actually into play a little bit during the COVID shutdown because the courts were shut down due to the pandemic. Victims were kind of left hanging out there because the criminal cases weren't moving. So at times, we did have to speak to the prosecutors about enforcing this right, bringing this right to the forefront, because victims wanted justice for what happened, because they have a right to be free from unreasonable delay. And this, once again, that came into play a little bit during the pandemic. And finally, they have a right to full and timely restitution. Restitution comes into play when there are medical bills due to injuries suffered from an alleged incident, or sometimes there's damage to property. If those things have occurred during an incident, a victim has a right to restitution in a criminal case, which means that the defendant will have to reimburse or make whole the victim in any monies that he or she has paid out of pocket. So, why should crime victims have an attorney? Well, as I mentioned a few moments ago, Ms. Weisberg and I, as victims' rights attorneys, we are the bridge between a criminal case and the victim. And as the bullet point says here, some of the rights afforded to victims in Florida Constitution, Article 1, Section 16, apply as soon as the crime occurs, but some only apply upon request. As a victim of crime, he or she is not going to be aware of these things. So it's important to have an attorney who understands these rights and how they're applicable in a criminal case, advise the victim in these situations. Many victims do not even know about these rights, not to mention how to request or enforce them during the criminal proceeding. Also, victims often have legal questions or concerns that cannot be answered by victim advocates or even the prosecutor. A common misconception by many is that prosecutors represent the victim. However, as I mentioned earlier during this presentation, the prosecutor represents the state of Florida and not the individual victim. Victims should have their own attorney to ensure their interests are protected by law, and most importantly, that their rights are advocated for.
So how can you help? Well, you can refer crime victims to the Legal Aid Service of Broward or Coast to Coast of Legal Aid of South Florida. You can tell your coworkers, family, and friends about our new project. You can distribute our flyer, and please let us know if any other organizations or agencies that may benefit from our presentation similar to this. This is our contact information. You can call or write if you have any questions or know of any clients who would benefit from our representation. My number is 954-736-2465, and my email address is pweisberg@legalaid.org.
And as you can see there, my office number, 954-736-2411. And my email is also there, pyune@legalaid.org. And as Ms. Weisberg just mentioned, if anybody is interested, or if anybody just has any questions of these rights, please feel free to contact our office. And also, some of this information is on our website, as you see on the presentation here at www.coasttocoastlegalaid.org. Also, here is just a summary of some of the services that we provide here at Coast to Coast Legal Aid. Once again, Ms. Weisberg and I are part of the family law unit. Just a brief side note here, oftentimes criminal cases have an accompanying case for victims of crime where there may be restraining orders or injunctions in place, divorce cases, and things of that nature. Well, our family law unit handles all of those issues. So if you know of anybody who has any questions, whether it's injunctions, divorces, a criminal case, anything like that. Also, I should mention human trafficking as well. Any questions about that, please feel free to visit our website or give us a call here at Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida. And one more time, any questions, please feel free to contact us. Our general line at the bottom of this slide here, once again, is 954-736-2411. Anybody who calls will certainly be screened for any services, and we can provide advice and counsel at times, or even representation. And I will end with this once again, that our services are free of charge. There will be no bills, no hidden fees, or anything like that. We are here to help our community, specifically victims of crime. And so please feel free to contact us. Financial eligibility, there are no requirements or anything like that.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much, everyone.